Hey everyone, this is Adam Sweet with Soul Astrology, and today we have edition number 20 of the Anonymous Birth Charts. This is a series in which I do bite-sized readings based on charts and questions submitted by you all. So let me go ahead and share the chart that we're going to take a look at for today. And the question that was submitted alongside this chart says, I'm thinking about changing careers. Should I change careers? What does the astrology say? All right, thank you for submitting that question. Let's check it out. So for career, we can look towards the 10th house, and that's because the 10th house is the most visible house in the birth chart. It is the top of the sky and thus represents our public reputation and our doings out there in the world, which is for most of us our career. Now that is occupied by the sign of Aries, and Aries is ruled by Mars here in the 11th house of our hopes and dreams. And the exaltation ruler of Aries is the sun down here in the first house. Now remember, the first house is the native. It's the helm of the ship, the steering wheel of the ship. So we have a strong connection between the 10th house and the first house in this chart, meaning that we can see that career aspirations are probably very important to this native, and there is definitely nothing wrong with that. Also, like I said, there's Mars here in that 11th house of hopes and dreams, ruling that 10th house, and it is in detriment because it is in the sign opposite its domicile. Now, often planets that are in detriment, especially with Mars in this case, can be incredibly ambitious and driven. And that's because planets that were in exile were literally thought of in ancient astrology as a foreigner in a foreign land. And so that can be an uncomfortable position, but it can also be a position where what's that foreigner going to do? He's going to try and get back home because he's uncomfortable. So he's going to be very ambitious. He's going to walk, metaphorically all the way back to his homeland and put in the effort that it takes to do so. So the fact that this native is asking about their career, I think, is very poignant at this moment in time. And just to be clear, yeah, there's no judgment there, nothing wrong with wanting to change careers or make more money. We can also see that the sun rules their second house here, because the sun is the ruler of Leo. Leo occupies the second house. We also have Mercury, which can represent money in the second house here, ruled by the sun. And that sun, like I said, it's in the first house and very close to this ascendant degree. So we have a potent, prominent sun ruling the career house and the money house and in that first house. And yeah, you go, girl, as they say. Go get that new job. That's what I would say. But let's, if it feels right, I should always qualify that. But I think that there's a little bit more information that we can look at here. So, as most of you know who have been following any form of astrology, there is a very potent transit coming up for all of us. But for this native, it applies to their career here in the 10th house. And that's because we have Neptune and Saturn ingressing into that 10th house of this native in Aries. And they are going to finally conjoin in this native's 10th house. So if I start moving these transits along, we're going to see there it was. Neptune moves in to their 10th house, and ingresses in ancient astrology were very potent and prominent moments. So that is very important. And then if we keep moving it along here, I think it's around February 14th, then, or 13th, 14th, somewhere in there. Then we have Saturn moves in to Aries permanently. And if we keep this going along, then on February 20th, we can see they both conjoin after a many months of, attempting to do so. It's been on and off for several months now. And here we are. Boom. They've conjoined at 0 degrees Aries. So this is very potent for all of us. This is one of those big transits that, everyone's talking about, but especially for this native and related to their career. It's happening in the 10th house. So what does that mean? Well, it can mean a lot of things. It can just mean that there's a lot of emphasis on that 10th house right now. But if we try and blend some of this symbolism together, I think we can maybe at least give this native a few things to think about. Now, like I said, it's happening in Aries. That's ruled by Mars. Aries is that very ambitious, fiery sign ruled by Mars and the sun. It can be, that spark we need to get things going. And then when we have Saturn coming through, which can represent things like limitations, and we have Neptune coming through, conjoining there. Neptune can be very dissolving. It's very otherworldly. It can be spiritual. It can even be like an illusion or a delusion. So if we think about limitations and dissolving of limitations and that ignition point, I could see this as being a point in this native's life where they get very ambitious to dissolve any limitations that they think they may have around career. And I think that's a beautiful thing right there. So the only thing that I would caution is if we look at those same significators, but maybe in a little bit more cautious light, we can say that Saturn brings with it the answer no. Saturn is that god of death and destruction. And when we pair it with Neptune, which is very romantic, it can literally be saying no to that romantic idea that you are going to go out there and crush this new job. So really, this is where longer readings are more important and a more nuanced approach to speaking with a native about exactly how that plays out. But I'm just throwing out those two completely different variables there to give you an idea that Saturn Neptune doesn't have to be this brutal thing where it's like, no, you're never getting a job. That's an illusion. That's a delusion. What are you thinking? It can also be one of those things where Saturn's the gatekeeper and Neptune is that romanticism of that. It's like, okay, with it being in Aries, now's the time. That's the spark that provides you to walk through that gate, metaphorically, right? Take on the new career you've always wanted. So the important thing here is that there is a ton of emphasis on that 10th house with that big transit coming through. And I think it's important just to keep our minds open about what that can mean, and that it's always best to err on the side of positivity, because ultimately that's what's going to get you where you want to go anyway, right? Nobody ever got anywhere by being super negative. So I think it's also important not to, speaking of Neptune, delude ourselves into thinking that maybe something that we are going after is an option. If it's not an option, it's very important to be quote unquote realistic with ourselves. That's where Saturn would come in there. But hopefully that gives this native some things to think about. All right. Well, that's what the astrology has to say about it. I hope everything works out for this native and we did some good work for him. If any of you are interested in a mini reading like the one you saw here today, send me an email, adam@soulastrology.com, with your birth data. That's time, date, and location, as well as a question, whatever's on your mind, and we'll see what the astrology says about it. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. I really appreciate you guys. Take care out there, and bye.